Hello, everyone. So today my topic is integrating a comprehensive gender support plan in schools. First, I just wanted to go over some objectives that we will be covering within the presentation. So first, we will discuss what a comprehensive gender support plan is and what all that involves, why this is an important school counseling topic, what role we would have as either the school counselor or school psychologist within this process, some different assessment and intervention ideas, and the way that this applies to various school settings, elementary, middle, and high school. So first, I just wanted to explain a little bit of the statistics behind this. According to a research study done in 2022, 1.4% of youth ages 13 to 17 in the United States identify as transgender. So this is becoming an increasing population in our schools. More and more children are coming out and feeling comfortable to socially transition in the school setting. So it's really important for us as counselors and school psychologists to understand and advocate for these youth and develop plans to help them. So with that in mind, I just wanted to go over a little bit about what it means to be transgender. The first point is that sex does not equal gender. So I like to say that sex is what's in between your legs, gender is what's between your ears, your brain. So someone's gender identity can be different from the sex they were assigned at birth. If the sex that you were assigned at birth and your gender identity align, you are a person who is considered cisgender. But if your gender identity differs, is not congruent with the sex that you were assigned at birth, then you would be transgender. But gender identity versus gender expression can be different. So as you can see on the graphic of the genderbread person over here, developed by Sam Killerman, gender identity has more to do with the way you think about yourself, your thought process, and the way that you identify. Expression can be different because that's how you dress, how you present to the world, the way we do our hair, the way we speak. So expression is more outward, and identity is more internal. So someone can identify as transgender or gender nonconforming, and can still be free to express outwardly however they feel comfortable. Overall, it's really important for counselors and pretty much anybody who is dealing with the transgender population in general to just, the underlying principle is respect, so it's the most important to remember that you don't have to fully understand something to accept it and be compassionate. Compassion is something that underlies the counseling profession, and it is something that we can do without full understanding, meaning, we're always going to continue learning more, but we can have that baseline level of respect and willingness to learn. You also want to ask about pronouns and use inclusive language. So you can be an ally by introducing yourself with your pronouns, asking others about theirs when you're meeting somebody for the first time, and using inclusive language like partner instead of boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband. You can also use inclusive language when you're addressing groups, like hello everyone instead of hello ladies and gentlemen, just being more aware of the words that you use and how they might relate to diversity. Another issue of respect is that everyone's choice to transition and what that looks like for them is different. So people are going to do what is the most comfortable for them, and they should be entitled to do that, to live authentically and express themselves as their true self. So some people may choose to medically transition. For some people, it's going to be a social transition only, and they may or may not choose to change their name. They may or may not go by different pronouns. But again, the key here is respect and learning about the person's personal journey and respecting the journey that they're going through. The last thing to understand up to this point is gender dysphoria. So that is when your gender identity and your sex assigned at birth, when they don't align and you identify as trans or gender nonconforming, you may experience dysphoria, which is like a disconnect or incongruency between your physical body and the way that you see yourself or the way that you want to express. So you might be uncomfortable with certain parts of your body, uncomfortable with your voice or your mannerisms, and it can really cause a lot of mental health issues, and is something for counselors and psychologists to be more aware of as we are helping these youth with mental health issues and learning to support them. As I mentioned, there are other gender nonconforming or gender diverse identities. So transgender is kind of an umbrella term sometimes, and identifying as non-binary or genderqueer, either identifying as both male and female, somewhere in between, or neither, being agender. There are many different terms for gender identities. There is definitely not just the binary of male, female that we're taught from a young age. So it is important to learn about and respect everybody's diverse gender identity, and use the terminology that's appropriate to them that they have defined for themselves. So this is all just important background knowledge for a school counselor or school psychologist to have, so that they are remaining respectful and asking appropriate questions, leaning into the client as the center of the practice, versus just making assumptions. And you can learn more by following the resources that I present at the end of this presentation. There are plenty of resources that I've found that provide professional development, or just articles online that you can read about the transgender population and specific interests and issues affecting our youth today. So the next part here is going to be delving more into the comprehensive gender support plan. Some places call it the GSP. So this is going to be kind of the core part of our presentation. The last part was a little bit of background knowledge. Now we're kind of jumping into it a little bit more. So when you're developing a gender support plan, this is generally more for like each individual student. So the big question that you kind of want to underline here is, how will the student's authentic gender be supported within the school environment? So this involves free self-expression, feeling welcome, feeling included, and kind of school just being a safe space, as it should be for every student. And the basis of this plan creates an understanding between the student, the teachers and the staff within the school, and their family members. So everyone is kind of involved in this, to talk about how to support the student, what they might need to consider, as the student is participating in extracurriculars, sports, classes that they might need to use the locker room for, like phys ed, or things, restroom use, and just everything they're going to need for their safety at school, their privacy, who is aware of their trans identity, and what disclosure looks like for that student, who their primary support people are within the school. So Gender Spectrum, which is one of the resources that I found, actually has a forum available online that I'm going to take you guys to now just to see. So this is what the confidential gender support plan looks like. This is just one example that I found. I'm sure you could come up with a different one that would work, but this one is general use for a school district. So it has, everything, just general demographics for the student themselves. And then, family involvement. So how involved is the family in the process? What can we think about if the family isn't aware of their identity, if it's not safe for them to come out within the home, general, who is aware and how is administration helping to support, how are other students helping to support, what are we going to do if there is a confidentiality issue so that there's a plan for that. The way that staff and other people can help to support, how they might be able to respond to questions, identifying the primary support people for this plan that the student can turn to if needed, safety considerations, names, pronouns, gender markers, the confidentiality of health records for FERPA, everything that has to do with data and record keeping, what should be the policy for contacting guardians. So if they're not aware that their child is transgender, referring to the student by their birth name to protect them if needed. Bathrooms, locker rooms, access to things, their extracurricular participation, dress code issues, how we might support the student through lessons and content. So we'll get into how to adapt the curriculum and create a new curriculum as well. And then also, any transportation problems, who is the kind of connection point, liaison between this whole thing, and who will be supporting the aspects of the plan. And then also the students' rights. So they have their own section of the form that basically lists what they're entitled to, what is protected for them, and who their main support people are. And then there's also down here some extra resources for support groups, for legal support, and other general support resources. So this is a really cool resource that I found that can be adapted for different schools' use. And now we're going to get back to the presentation. So that's generally what a GSP would look like, and developing it. The school counselor has a primary role as the liaison, working with the family, working with the student and other staff members. They would be a core central person in developing this plan of support. So something that's tied to this is the rights of transgender youth. It was a little bit touched on within the gender support plan, but the U.S. Department of Education protects transgender and non-binary, gender non-conforming students from discrimination under Title IX. There was a letter that came out regarding transgender students and supporting them, but the Department of Ed has been restrained from implementing this protection in the states listed here. So the states highlighted in red here, they are not necessarily covered under this protection, which is why we're seeing the different bills being passed now to try to limit transgender students' rights at school. But what is covered under Title IX within the Department of Ed is their restroom and locker room use. So using the facilities that correspond to their gender identity, what would be the most comfortable for them, using the name that they go by, that they prefer, their correct pronouns that they have advocated for, and their confidentiality, their privacy in records, their health information being protected with FERPA, and their privacy just as a general student, who is aware of their identity as a transgender person, who is not, what is kind of their thoughts regarding that, letting them take the lead in this. Dress code is also covered under Title IX, so the child has the right to dress in the dress code standards that relate to their gender identity. So if you have a female to male transgender student in your school, he would be entitled to follow the male dress code because he identifies as male, and he could not be punished unfairly for, not following a female dress code. Title IX also overrides any conflicting state laws. So if one of the states, aside from the ones highlighted here that do not follow this, were to create a law that tries to regulate something that should be protected under Title IX trumps that. And the law then would not apply. It would be Title IX protection instead. So then knowing, what it is to be trans, what the plan would look like for an individual student, and then also what these students' rights are through the Department of Education. Now it's kind of time to talk about what does this look like when we put it all together? What is the school-wide practice? How can we integrate this into a larger program so we're not just handling it one student at a time? We are being more proactive in our support process. So an integrated plan, very similar to person-centered counseling, you're putting students at the forefront. And one of the questions to ask yourself as the counselor, as the liaison support person in this process is, how are we accounting for the unique gender identity of every student? This shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. It should be adapted as necessary for each and every individual student, and putting them at the forefront to take the lead. So a quote that I found that I really like from Dana Stachowiak is, "Decentering cisgender privilege is the work of cisgender educators." So this is something that I think a lot of us can relate to. Cisgender privilege is the privilege that somebody has when their sex assigned at birth and their gender identity align. They would not face the same type of discrimination or oppression as a transgender person. And it is especially important for cisgender educators and professionals to deeply and genuinely understand how to support transgender youth, and understanding their own privilege and interrogating that, confronting that, so that we can help focus on supporting the transgender students, supporting and finding their strengths. If we lead with the child's strengths and do not keep a deficit perspective, the plan is more likely to be successful. So generally, as we move towards inclusive education, gender inclusive practices, you're also promoting school safety and academic progress increases. So students that feel more included, more welcomed in the school environment, schools that are practicing this kind of gender support plan, benefits everybody all around. It is just generally the best for not only the transgender students, but you're also helping cisgender students learn more about diversity, learning more social emotional topics, respecting others, and you're creating a great community of diversity within your building, which is how schools should be. So there's actually a checklist here that I'm going to take everybody to. And this checklist is from the Human Rights Campaign, Welcoming Schools. And this would be one way to sort of use an assessment. So for assessments for this topic, it would be more important and feasible to assess the school and the curriculum in general, the climate, versus the students themselves. In my opinion, there is no need to assess the students. They shouldn't have to prove their transgender identity, or advocate for their gender identity. We should be the ones advocating for them, as professionals. So it is going to be more about evaluating the environment and seeing what changes need to be made to create this more inclusive community. So this is the checklist here, and it goes over things related to the student's name, the pronouns, where and when is the student going by this name using these pronouns? What does their information look like in the school database? How could we, change this if needed? Who do we contact to go through the procedure of changing records? Is the family aware that they're able to do this? What does family support look like? This would be incredibly important for the counselor themselves, and also teachers who are going to work with the family through meetings and things like that. Who is affirming for them, who is not? Are they connected with support groups? How can we provide resources for the family? Recognizing that each situation is unique. School support, this would be also touched on within the individual GSP. Designated primary support people, one of which would likely be the school counselor, school psychologist, professional development plan for staff, policies and procedures to support trans and gender nonconforming, non-binary students, the anti-bullying policy and what is covered through that, and then what would follow through look like if there was an issue of bullying. Also, extracurriculars, restrooms, facilities, etc. All of that has to do with their rights under Title IX, and what is being done to protect that. So that's kind of a checklist that school officials, school staff can use to evaluate where the school currently is and what needs to be improved upon to create this inclusive, comprehensive support plan for their gender diverse students. So that is the first bullet, how we're putting the students at the forefront. The next part is going to be challenging the current curriculum and making the changes as necessary. And that also involves an assessment of what the curriculum currently looks like, what is it missing, and how can we implement different lessons, and not just in a fragmented way where it's only touched on, to meet this specific requirement, but it's more integrated and comprehensive throughout the curriculum. Communication with families is also key, as they are a part of the gender support plans individually, and then should also be part of the integrated plan. And you may also face questions from students, families, the families of cisgender students who might question, why is the school moving in this direction? And this is when the counselor and other school staff really need to be advocates for change, and explain respectfully why this type of plan, why this type of curriculum is beneficial for all students, and what every student is learning through the process, and appreciation of diversity and awareness of identity and things like that. So then as you are challenging the current curriculum, you're adapting and integrating different instructional approaches to meet the needs that you've determined that the school is required to follow. So as you are assessing what needs to be different, you are making changes and using the instructional approaches that we will talk about in just a second here to follow through with that plan. So like we've talked about, the school counselor, school psychologist is going to take a very primary role in this process because our role is being an advocate. Our role is being a model, taking the initiative if it hasn't been already implemented. And that starts by examining our own biases and beliefs. So it's internal work first. And then it's encouraging others to do the same. And you might do this through professional development that you could lead or find and locate, have other resources come in, or throughout the consultation process. So if a teacher or another staff member brings to your attention that they're unsure how to support this student in their classroom who might have just came out to them as transgender, or a new student coming into the school who identifies as gender nonconforming, and helping the other staff kind of go through this internal process as well. So Dana Stachowiak, again, includes some questions for reflection in her article. And these are ways to challenge your biases. So when did you first learn about trans, gender queer, or gender nonconforming people? And how did these messages impact your understanding of gender? So you can ask this for yourself either as a cisgender person or a transgender person. How do these impact your understanding of gender? How do these messages impact your journey to no longer identifying as cisgender if you are a trans person? Do you know anybody who identifies as trans, gender queer, or gender nonconforming? How has this influenced your understanding of gender? Rating your comfortability and why you may or may not want to be friends with a person who identifies as transgender. Thinking about safety issues, thinking about how you might feel in a bathroom that does or does not match your gender identity. What impact does this have? Considering feelings, considering emotions. Internalized depression regarding gender and how this impacts interactions, what we can do to change this, eradicate this. And then the other positions in your life, your other cultural status. How does this intersect with gender identity? So considering intersectionality, what does your other pieces of yourself, your other cultural identities, how do they all come together and affect your worldview, your perspective? So these are all kind of general internal questions that we want to ask first before we delve into making our integrative changes, because we need to fully understand and examine ourselves first before we're able to create this initiative and take this to the next level. So the school counselor would play not only a primary role in being a support person for a transgender student and being a initiator of a gender support plan, but also modeling inclusivity and examining their own beliefs, encouraging others to do the same. This is another resource that I found from Dana Stachowiak, and it is going over how we can move from a more traditional standpoint of thinking about gender identity to a more inclusive standpoint and what this looks like. So as you can see, we start in the traditional sense of thinking very much in the binary, male versus female, right? Just those two. So this is where gender norms and stereotypes kind of play in. We're excluding the transgender, genderqueer, and gender nonconforming people. And this is where we see gender privilege. And then when we are in this silencing perspective, we might, think that this is better because we're just saying, we don't see gender at all. But this blind perspective kind of encourages oppression in a way because we're choosing not to see it as a factor. So this is ignoring the issues that oppression plays inside and out of the classroom and preventing us moving towards inclusion. As we become more progressive along this line, we are reflecting on how gender operates, but we might still be considering along this binary, this male-female perspective, and not including our transgender non-conforming students within this perspective. And what we want to move towards is this inclusive practice down at the bottom, where gender is fluid. We're recognizing that gender can change over time, that it's an individual process, and that we can challenge our own perceptions. But we do need the education and training behind this, which is where the professional development comes into play. So one of the first strategies for intervention within the school setting is professional development itself. So like I said, there are many resources, some of which are going to be listed at the end of this presentation to begin the professional development process for developing a comprehensive gender support plan in the schools. It's also important to go over the anti-bullying policy that the school has. Most schools do have them. And what it does or doesn't say about protecting gender identity and transgender children. Thinking about access to facilities again, and your inclusive language also, the messages that you're sending to your students that you're modeling for them throughout curriculum and the way they interact. And then one of the primary things is your lessons. So what role does the counselor play, in teaching social emotional learning? How can we integrate this message of inclusion throughout all of our curriculum and not just, oh, this is something only the counselor does when they come in, but making it kind of a whole school initiative. So here, if we click our lesson ideas link, it's going to take us to GLSEN, which goes over inclusive curriculum resources and what best practices are, some ideas in this case. So this goes over how to create an affirming curriculum for all students, and the window and mirror idea, which we are going to go over in just a second. But it's basically being able to see oneself, so a mirror, and recognize the diversity of others, recognizing other perspectives. So a window through curriculum, and mainly through literacy is a very large way that we do this in the school setting. And then there are some steps here that you can take. So there are some specific ways to address bullying using teachable moments to promote inclusivity, supporting students, and learning about accountability. There's a section here on how to address pushback that somebody might receive when going through this process. So again, this is advocating for the benefits of all students, teaching them about diversity, respect, creating a more welcoming school environment in which everyone can learn, developing understanding and foundations of empathy, inclusive curriculum that helps others connect and collaborate together, and then also just helping with mental health outcomes, reducing incidences of depression, of skipping school, and other mental health issues, anxiety, things like that. And then here we have some of the opportunities. So I love this resource because it goes through how this could look as applied to pretty much any school setting through early elementary through high school. Um, so social emotional, this is all going to be about identity. Um, and you're going to start it really simple. Just, what does identity mean? Let's talk about it together. What does respect mean for other people, and for ourselves? And then we're going to talk a little bit about like our culture and where we come from. In upper elementary, we're going to be able to explore identity a little bit deeper. Middle school is about challenging assumptions, learning about labels, why they affect people. And then high school, we are learning more about consent, learning more about the impact of labels, and going into a deeper understanding of this. So there are also things that we can do for science, for sex ed, for highlighting diversity, for understanding sex versus gender, for understanding more of an inclusive view versus a traditional gender standpoint. And then there are ways here to connect it to Common Core standards as well. So this becomes, like I said, more of a integrated curriculum change instead of just doing like a one-off social emotional lesson. This becomes more of a thread through the entire school that everybody is participating in, that all the students and teachers are aware of. So here, even, math, putting some inclusive language into math problems, using statistics from LGBTQ surveys, and analyzing data. And these are all lesson ideas that you can go through here, that GLSEN has linked here that they have prepared. So this is a great resource for educators and counselors. So like I said, literacy is a big way that we do this. We're going to promote an understanding of oneself and others, learning about gender stereotypes and gender oppression, practicing and defining ways to stand up to bullying. What does bullying look like? What does bullying sound like? What are ways that we can help? Strategies for allyship, which relates back to respect, and how we help others, and then how we also identify if somebody might need support. And a big thing for all of our students, not just our transgender students, is going to be teaching self-reflection, teaching that internal dialogue, understanding our own identity, but also using empathy for others, empathy for ourselves, and self-respect and respect outwardly as well. This mirrors and windows that we touched on, the mirror of something, again, is looking through a resource, using a book, right, and seeing yourself within that. So self-representation, and self-reflection, connecting to your own identity through curriculum. Window is more looking through, right? So window is, how can I see somebody else's perspective through this? What is this representing that differs from, how I might have been taught something, or what my experiences are, and why is it important for me to understand this other experience? So again, this is a way that we avoid teaching it in fragments, in little pieces, but instead create a comprehensive curriculum. And this goes along with creating a safe space within the school. What would this look like? What does it mean for a school to be a welcoming and inclusive place? What training does our staff need? What resources do our students have access to? Just generally considering things that might need to change within the school setting. So there are 4 approaches that have been identified, kind of in different levels, to create this integrated process, and kind of break this into more feasible steps, kind of like a ladder that you're going down. So as we're integrating inclusive practices, we're going to start first internally. Like we said, we are acknowledging our biases. We are encouraging other people to do the same. We are using professional development resources. We are gaining knowledge. We're reflecting, and we're applying this gender lens, meaning how has gender identity and the way that this intersects with my other cultural identities, how is this shaping the way that I view the world, the way that I act in the world. And then it moves towards interpersonal. So how are we communicating? What are the messages that we're sending? How can we make these more inclusive? What does this look like in the classroom? What does this look like for the curriculum? What does this look like as we're communicating with family, with other staff members? Instructional is level 3. So this is when we look at our specific lesson plans or specific interventions. What are we planning? What are we adapting to? And what pieces of the curriculum do we need to change? And then institutional overall, this is our policies. How have we changed our policies to become more inclusive? What training are we providing to staff? Not only at the beginning, but how are we continuing this training, continuing this professional development? And how are we serving as activists, as advocates for our transgender and gender nonconforming students within the community and advocating for their rights? So it's really this approach that gets wider as the plan becomes more integral. And then you might be thinking, well, why does this matter? What is the impact of all this? Why would I spend time advocating for this particular population? Why does this relate to my profession? Why should I be taking the time to assess the curriculum and implement these interventions, these lessons, and these ideas that we've gone over? So really, the bottom line is this is the role of the counselor. This is the role of the school psychologist. We pride ourselves on empathy and the way that we connect with others. Inclusivity, empathy, multicultural competence, and diversity, they're all at the core of the profession itself, what it means to be a counselor. We have we're required. This is what we do. We help others. And this is all under, ACA Code of Ethics, is doing what you can to help others, do no harm, which means, learn more, do what you can. You are a source of support. And there was actually a study done by the Trevor Project that is linked at the end of this presentation, that caring teachers and staff help students achieve more, and they lower the risk of mental health issues. So when LGBTQ plus students are aware that they have a support system, are aware of the supportive policies and the inclusive curriculum that their school is following, they can achieve more because they feel more welcome, and they have a lower risk of mental health issues because they are represented and learning about their own identity and these issues within the school curriculum. So this integral curriculum, like I said, not only supports the mental health of the population we're targeting here, the transgender, gender nonconforming kiddos, but also our cisgender students who are learning about identity and learning about diversity. There are specific concerns remaining for our students who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, or have low socioeconomic status. These students have historically not felt as represented within the school curriculum, and when these identities intersect with an LGBTQ identity, these students have reported feeling less seen, less acknowledged, and less care coming from teachers and staff. So this is an important subset of the population that we want to focus on, especially in the future. And if you'd like to obtain more info on this topic, these are some of the resources that I used that you can also go through. Gender Spectrum provides a great inclusive schools network resource, a deeper understanding of gender. There's an activity called My Gender Journey that can be used for professional development as well. HRC is the Human Rights Campaign, using this for the Welcoming Schools resources. International Literacy Association has lessons and strategies for interventions to create a gender inclusive curriculum. GLSEN also has curriculum suggestions. The National Center for Transgender Equality, or NCTE, has ways for cisgender people to learn about transgender identity and ways to be an ally and an advocate. And then the Trevor Project has research studies as well as ways to support transgender youth. And these are all the references that I used within this presentation. So thank you all for listening, and I would be happy to answer any questions. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.